Conversation 2. Conversation 2. Discovery of fascination. Doctor, I wish to prove in our conversation today that Adam was perfectly aware of the power of fascination together with clairvoyance and those other mysteries that astonish so much the people of the present day. Lady, why did he not communicate this knowledge to his descendants so that the matter might become universal and undoubted? Hey, what's up? Doctor, I cannot answer better than in the words of that veritable historian John Bunyan, who tells us that King Shaddai, in the 6th day of the year 1, built in the country of a universe a fair and delicate town called Mansoul, and endowed it with corporate privileges, a town for buildings so curious, for situations so advantageous, that there was not its equal on the face of the whole world. Yea, it was so goodly, when first built, that the gods, at the setting up of it, came down to sing for joy. It was so mighty as to have dominion over all the country round about it, for all were required to acknowledge it for their metropolitan, and do it homage. It had commission and power from the king to demand service of all, and also subdue those who in any way opposed it. There were certain gates in man's soul by which access could be gained to the celestial county round about it, and communion held with the messengers, who were constantly coming and going from the court of Shaddai. The inhabitants took full advantage of all their glorious privileges, and conversed with the gods freely, so that all the time they continued under the dominion of its builder, nothing but sounds of joy and praise were heard. But when, as it is well known, they rebelled against his government, and swore allegiance to Diabolus, his enemy, a dreadful change came over them, and, among the other enjoyments of which they were bereft, the gates were closed that opened to the celestial country, and no communication through them, unless under extraordinary circumstances, ever allowed. As the gates became disused, they were gradually forgotten by the many, and for thousands of years all remembrance of them lost. Why, you do not surely think that heaven is around us, and that if we could see through those gates, we would behold its glories at once? I have always entertained the idea that the celestial country was an immense distance off, and when we died, there was a long journey to travel before it could be reached. Doctor, that the material world is contained in the spiritual admits of direct proof, and a little reflection will convince us at once of the fact. You know, we are told that the angels that encamp round about them that fear the Lord do always behold the face of our Father which is in heaven. And were our senses not holden until the time when we shall be caught up to meet the Lord in the air, we might see the cloud of witnesses surveying our heavenward race, and behold, as Stephen did when he was martyred, heaven opened, and Jesus sitting at the right hand of God. I must confess, it would please me better to find some certain proof of this in the Bible, and also of someone who had seen it that would be immediately convincing. Doctor, you will be surprised then by an attentive examination in the 6th chapter of 2 Kings, When Elisha's servant perceived his master's house surrounded by the warriors of the king of Syria, who evidently came with a hostile intent, he was extremely frightened and cried, "Alas, my master, how shall we do?" And Elisha answered and said, "Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them." But as this did not quiet him, Elisha prayed and said, "Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see." And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. I am satisfied, but cannot help expressing my astonishment at the clearness of all the proofs you bring forward to sustain your positions. Do you suppose they practiced fascination before the deluge? Doctor: Though they might be aware of the existence of the celestial gates, yet that the mode of opening them and also producing curative influence was known before the flood, it is, of course, out of our power to determine, but that it was soon manifest after that period is undoubted. Though the immediate descendants of Noah were aware of the being and some of the attributes of Jehovah, yet their knowledge, handed down to posterity only by tradition, became corrupt, and the invisible and eternal One was lost sight of in the homage paid to things of wood and stone, the charge of which, involving as it did in their eyes communion with superior powers, was the most important office in the nation, and one too which it was the earnest endeavor of all to obtain. Now, who was so likely to obtain it as those who pretended to be especial favorites of the gods themselves, proving their assertions in the most satisfactory manner by the cure of diseases? Accordingly, we find the heathen priests were the first fascinators. But how did they discover the mode of doing it? Doctor: An attentive examination of the subject has brought me to a conclusion that most likely will very much surprise you. I think the requisite knowledge was imparted by Satan himself, either in a direct manner or by prompting the mind to a series of experiments that led to the discovery. He did this to increase his influence, so that a chosen few, on whom he could depend, might guide the many in the ways of destruction. Proof of this, I think, can be found in the fact, naturally abhorrent to humanity, for man has been defined to be a religious animal, that all barbarous nations pay more homage to the spirit of evil than they do to the spirit of good. And, as a matter of course, their rites of worship are of the most revolting and bloodthirsty description, extreme licentiousness characterizing their devotions, as well as suspension by hooks, etc., and the murder of infants and adults. If fascination is power imparted by Satan, why is it not sinful to have recourse to it? Doctor: He did not impart the power, but merely showed the fact of its existence. It is a gift from Jehovah, and as such, with all thankfulness may we make use of it to subserve his honor and glory. The Lord makes the wrath of man to praise him, as well as the wrath of Satan, who will no doubt find it in the end, like many other of his projects, one of the most efficient means of his overthrow. Uniting as the heathen magi did the offices of priest and physician, as well as king, which last office they afterwards voluntarily separated, though they kept it subordinate to their own, and the number of known remedies being then very few, they were mostly compelled to rely on fascination for giving relief in sickness. Some of them possessed this power in so extraordinary degree, and had their fame so widely extended as to be deified after death, having idol statues shaped in their likenesses, to which divine honors were paid, the qualities for which they were thus honored being symbolized by an additional number of arms. Proofs of this may be seen at the present day in the images of the gods of India, Vishnu, Shivan, Parashivan, Ravana, and many others have 4, 6, and 12 arms, all presenting the hands open, with the palms inclining downwards, the fingers being in the most approved fascinating positions of the present day. It is probable that the immediate application of the hands was reserved for special purposes, curiously shaped rods of various kinds being mostly used to direct the influence. Thus the caduceus of Mercury, it was supposed, had the power of putting any one whom it touched to sleep. With it he deepened the slumbers of Argus, after lulling him to a gentle repose by the sound of his lyre, preparatory to cutting off his head. That he sometimes dispensed with its use is evident from a passage in Plautus, which makes him say of Sosia, "What if I stroke him gently with the hand, so as to put him to sleep?" May know the regal scepter have been used before the separation of priest and king, for the same purposes as the caduceus of Mercury, and be as well as the royal touch for the cure of scrofula, the last remains of the former union of offices. Nothing can be more probable in this view of the subject. The Magi, or wise men of India, the most ancient fascinators of whom profane history gives any account, practiced mostly gestures and manipulations in curing disease, though they often prescribed herbs. Is any particular account given of their curing by fascination? Philostratus mentions the case of a young man whom a lion had injured in the knee to such an extent as to keep him in constant agony, and who went to the Magi to obtain relief. They rubbed him gently with their hands at intervals during a few days, when he returned home perfectly cured. Next come the priests of Egypt, who took the greatest possible advantage of the secret, and made the knowledge of it the last and holiest rite of their ancient magic in the initiation of candidates. So celebrated were they that many persons, taking advantage of our Saviour's temporary residence in Egypt, professed to account for his miracles by accusing him, according to Arnobius, of being a magician, of making things by secret means, and of stealing from the sanctuary of the Egyptian priests the names of the powerful angels and their occult disciples. Patients flocked to these Egyptians from all parts of the world. Their mode of proceeding was to previously prepare them by means of fasting and prayer, and then wrap them up in goat skins. After the process of fascination, they were left to wait for sleep and prophetic visions. In some instances these did not occur, but to provide for the emergency, there was a company of priests who slept for them and revealed the dreams. A record of each case telling the name of the person, the disease, and the remedy was engraved on the temple, and these inscriptions, we are told, were for a long while the sole record of practical medicine. 5 of these have been translated, the following 2 of which will give an idea of what they were. The god, in a nocturnal apparition, ordered the son of Lucius, who was attacked with a hopeless pleurisy, to take from the altar some cinders, and mixing them with wine, make an application to the affected side. He was saved. He thanked the god, and the people wished him happiness. What's up? It's a book about hypnotism. A blind soldier named Valerius, after consulting the god, received for answer, "Go in the temple, mix the blood of a white fowl with honey, and wash your eyes with it during 3 days." He recovered his sight and thanked the god before the people. What does it mean when it says they waited for visions? I must take a rather circuitous mode of answering your question. We must now study a little physiology, and as I will avoid all hard names and endeavor to simplify as much as possible, you will not find it difficult to follow me in the explanation. Man has 3 perfectly distinct elements in his composition: matter, life principle, and the soul or immortal part. I thought life resulted from the union of all the different organs, and that their being placed in just such relations made the machine work harmoniously. That has been, and even now is, the opinion of a great many, but when the system is growing, and also in dis-ease, some parts are always out of relation to the rest, and the proportion and balance thus utterly destroyed. And did life only result from the union of it all? It must cease in such cases at once to exist. The inductive and only true method of reasoning refers the various operations going on within the body to a common cause, which source of action is called the life or vital principle. But how is this cause discovered? By the phenomena it presents to us. We can perceive these phenomena only through the agency of matter, for which purpose alone, it would seem, matter was created. As a matter governed by laws of its own, it appears to me that in experimenting upon it, you would only be finding out those laws. The laws of matter, which are known as the chemical and mechanical forces, differ entirely from those manifested by it when organized. Still, I have not a clear idea of the vital principle. When I would separate it from the soul and matter, the 2 last continually force themselves upon my mind and make the whole subject very confused. If it was only possible to observe the vital principle acting with matter alone, without the soul's interference, I could easily understand it. Your wish can at once be gratified by looking at the geranium on your windowsill. Vegetables have only the vital principle and matter. But perhaps I cannot do better than refer you to an article on this subject, prepared by myself for a literary magazine some years ago. Will you read it aloud? It was remarked by a philosopher some years ago that it was scarcely possible to tell the difference between a dog and a rose. This statement to the greater number of my readers who have not reflected on the subject will appear hardly probable. Anecdotes of the sagacity and faithfulness of dogs are known to all, and I doubt not many of them in our city are possessed of more knowledge and practical information, and are better members of society than the swarms of idle and vicious youth who crowd our streets. How, then, with such facts before him, could Bonnet make such an assertion? I will tell you. Our ideas of the intelligence of animals are derived from the proofs of design we see them exhibit. Having a certain end in view, they will choose with the most astonishing discrimination, out of a number of means, the ones best adapted to their purposes, and contrive to use these in such a way as to be almost uniformly successful. Natural history is made up of facts in support of this position. Our next inquiry will be to find out whether plants ever show such instances of choice and foresight, and a little examination will prove that most unquestionably they do. Strawberries planted on moist ground give out no runners, but on placing them in dry soil with water at some distance, we find runners traveling around until they discover it, and then remaining a living aqueduct to supply the plant. If these runners are moved round to the other side, they will soon regain their original position with unerring certainty. If you turn the under surface of a rose leaf upward, it will in a little while commence a return movement, gently twisting with a kind of effort on its peduncle, as on a sort of pivot. The Abbé Martin transplanted a rose tree from one part of his garden to another for the purpose of experiment. To the right of the new position, the soil was hard, dry, and sterile. To the left, moist, rich, and tender. The roots at first radiated alike to the right and left, but he soon discovered that the roots, which had advanced to the right, bent backward toward the fertile and mellow earth, as if divining that their companions at the left had found better pasture. To prevent their intercepting nourishment intended for other plants, he dug a ditch to stop the farther advancement of the roots. Arrived at the ditch, they plunged perpendicularly below its bottom, ran around, and advanced anew toward the point when they had discovered the rich soil. Instances of their foresight in guarding against excessive heat, wind, and rain are equally numerous. In France, the peasants train the carlina by their doors to serve as a barometer. Its open flowers show clear weather, but closed an abundance of rain. The shepherd's weather glass has the same property. If it does not show its face to greet the sun on its ascension, the sheep remain in the fold on that day. The 4 o'clock open its flowers regularly every afternoon at that hour, to show the laborer that if he cannot afford a watch, nature will provide him with the means of knowing the hour without expense. Such examples certainly prove a faculty of judging according to the sense in plants. And now the inquirer asks, what is the nature of this principle, and in what does it differ from chemical affinity or attraction? A perfect exemplification of this difference is given in the history of its creation. And God made every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. Dry land and seas by this time were divided, and the forces of the inorganic world in operation. These forces are called pullers down of nature. Exposed to their influence, mountain and hill crumble to dust, and it is owing to their agency that volcanoes and earthquakes destroy cities and swallow up nations. This is due probably to the shape of the ultimate atoms, which, fitting into each other in different ways, occasion perpetual change. But on the third day, a controlling influence, a new set of powers, the builders up of nature appear, created in kind and degree different from matter, yet only manifesting their presence to us in connection with it. So far from allowing these atoms to unite according to their affinities, which would soon destroy nature, they exercise the most despotic sway, controlling them to the last. The chemical forces are in perfect subjection while life remains, but the moment it departs, dust returns to dust. The work of destruction begins, and the body vanishes into air. A beautiful example of this opposition is shown by the seeds, which are the simplest independent form of the union of the life power with matter. Take two of these, and having destroyed the vitality of one of them by passing an electric spark through it, place both in warm and moist earth. The dead seed, surrounded by all the conditions favorable to its decomposition, is speedily resolved into its native elements, while the living one makes slaves of its enemies, rapidly sprouts up amid the surrounding desolation, and hangs out its flowery banners as tokens of victory. Seeds retain life almost at any length of time. I noticed this week an account of an abundant harvest reaped from the growth of seeds found in an Egyptian mummy over 2,000 years old. A seed, finding itself in a warm, moist place, suddenly becomes aware that it has work to do and sets about it without delay. The seed case bursts, a stalk and leaves appear above, while the root, sending off filaments, remains below. At the end of each of these little filaments is a spongiole, or bundle of leech-like mouths. These suck from the soil whatever they require, and then act the part of a stomach in instantly digesting it. A series of ascending vessels, or veins, are ready to carry it to the leaves to be further elaborated. When it arrives there, its oxygen is given off, and a supply of carbonic acid obtained from the air is combined with it, and the pure blood, or sap, is carried by the arteries to every part to supply its necessities and form compounds. Plants are manufacturing establishments. Some make the essential oils, as the cinnamon, sassafras, and rose. Others salts, as the sorrel, oxalic acid, the Peruvian bark tree quinine, and the willow salicine. Many a disposed shrub has powers more deadly and dangerous than a powder magazine. The laurel and peach yield Prussian acid, one drop of which will destroy life, and travelers tell us that the atmosphere of the upas tree is fatal for miles around it. The vital principle of each plant, being separate and independent in itself, explains the reason why two of them, the one a virulent poison, the other a table vegetable, will grow side by side and draw their nourishment from the same source. It also shows the error of our modern agriculturists who treat these living existences, endowed with the power of choice and foresight, as if they were tubes, imbibing whatever was placed near them by capillary attraction. Man resembles a torch in requiring oxygen to keep him burning alive. In return for this, he throws out carbonic acid, which to him is a virulent poison. Now, what prevents this gas accumulating in the air and destroying the animal kingdom? And from what source shall the supply of oxygen be derived to answer our continual demand? Only from the respiration of plants, which we may now see not only supply us with food, but are absolutely necessary for our daily existence. When the new custom house and merchants' exchange were erecting, they were the daily resort of thousands who flocked to witness their gradual progress. Yet how much more wonderful is the building of a vegetable palace! Unseen workmen are urging it forward with untiring industry. Column after column forms, story after story rises, staircase and hall and gallery are soon fixed in their positions. We think it a great thing to have the Croton water brought into our houses, yet in every one of those little chambers there are pipes to carry food and water and take away the residue. The vegetable house is made of the finest wood, is elastic and capable of bending to the breeze, and to defend it from the rain, covered either with waterproof varnish or stuccoed over with the rarest porcelain. And all this time the spectator is not disturbed by noise or dust, the greater part of the work being carried on underground. When all is completed, no monarch on earth could obtain such a residence. The very paint of its walls, though exposed to all kinds of impurity, is of such rare quality that the king's stateliest robes cannot match it. Consider the lilies of the field. They toil not, neither do they spin. Yet Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Nay, kings are even glad to obtain its essences at second hand to perfume themselves. The name of the inhabitant who owns the house is written on a broad doorplate of surpassing beauty, so that we can tell one from another. Books have been written on the language of these doorplates or flowers, and it is said that angels by their means write mysterious truths on hill and field. The poet from the earliest ages has held the most sweet and loving converse with them. But to the physician, the priest of nature, they speak in a higher and more exalted strain. In them he reads the success of his mission. By their means he can conquer the most obstinate diseases. That nothing has ever been formed for show alone. The truly useful will always be the truly beautiful. That when their uses are perfectly understood, the fond dream of the Rosicrucian shall not want verification. The bone shall continue firm and the muscle strong. The eye of youth retain its luster. And as century after century passes away, the lapse of time shall but witness our triumph over the pullers down of nature, and our increase in wisdom and love. These happy children of Flora, that have retained undimmed the influence of their Creator's smile, when first he pronounced his work good in Eden, shall receive added radiance and more dazzling glory, as they again behold his face in the dawning morn of the millennium. Thank you for letting me read to you. Please check the description for where to buy my art, where to watch my movie, and where to send me a one-time donation. And I will see you tomorrow.